Thank you for watching us today online. I'm Steve, and I'm the Connections Pastor here at the Gathering. We would love the opportunity to meet you in person, and that's really easy to do. There's going to be a link below that you can plan a visit. So make sure you take some time to plan a visit in person because I would like to meet you. Our team would love to help to get you connected here at the Gathering, so can't wait to see you here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. And if you're a first-time guest, we especially want to welcome you. We're so happy you decided to join us. On your way in, you got a connection card, and we'd love for you to fill it out and tell us about your visit here today. I'm Stephanie, and I wanted to just highlight 3 events that are upcoming here at the Gathering. The first is tonight, our church bonfire. It's at 5 p.m., which is a change from earlier announcements, so please come back and join us at 5 p.m. out by the barn and make great connections with your church family. The second is next Saturday. We have a prayer walk for More Than Able. We'd love for you to join us from 9 to 12. It's here at the Gathering. Any time in there, and for a guided prayer walk that's really focused on praying for the More Than Able campaign right before Commitment Sunday. The third is baptism. We have our next baptism on December 8th. Baptism is an outward sign of an inward change. So if you're ready to make the plunge and show the world what God has done for you, we would love for you to sign up, get baptized. You can sign up through the Church Center app, or you can sign up on your connection card. There's a lot more in the Church Center app about great events that are coming up here at the Gathering, so I'd encourage you to check that out. Here at the Gathering, we love to worship Jesus. We love to learn about Jesus. We're going to spend a little bit of time singing this morning. We're going to hear a great message from Pastor David. So at this time, please stand up and worship together.
Let's sing this out together. The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. Oh, my God will never fail. Oh, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Oh. now they'd fall, but you have never failed me. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me. Come on, let's lift this up together. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. You never fail me. I know that I won't last, but your word will come to pass, and my heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough to keep me within your love. Oh, my heart will sing your praise again. Oh, your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. start to forget all of the great things you did? When did I throw away faithfully impossible? How did I start to believe that you weren't sufficient for me? Why do I talk myself out of seeing miracles? You are more than able. You are more than able. God, we stand here confident in your ability, God, to do much more than we ever could ask or even imagine. God, we stand here today confident in who you are because of what you have already done. God, that you already came and conquered death, hell, and the grave. God, you are the creator and the sustainer of life and of this earth. And so, God, we just stand here confident, knowing that you are with us, knowing that you go before us. And God, we just ask today that you fill us up with faith and boldness. God, where we are facing those things that seem so big that we can't handle them, remind us that you can. And God, those things that are in our life that seem too insignificant for you, God, remind us that you are with us and you care about those things too. God, that we can bring all of our worry, all of our cares, all of our burdens to you. And God, this morning we've come here to seek you, so we just ask, God, that whatever you have for us to receive, help us to receive it. God, where you are challenging us to change and to grow, help us to have the faith to take the steps you are calling us to take. God, that we might become the people you created us to be. God, we thank you so much for who you are. And it's in your name that we pray and we sing. Amen. Y'all can take a seat.
I wanted to take a moment today and talk to you about our Church Center app. It's got so many good things on there, and I wanted to highlight a few of them for you. But first, if you don't have the Church Center app, go ahead, take out your phone. You can download it right now because it's the best way to stay up to date with all that's going on and a few extras I think you're going to like and want to have. To get the Church Center app, if you go to any of the app stores, you can just type in Church Center app, download it, and then you connect with the gathering by following some of the prompts that they have on the app. There's lots of awesome things on here, so you can find all the open groups on the app. You can find the events that are going on, what's coming up right now, so you stay up to date on everything that's happening here at the gathering. And one thing you may not know about that I think you want to know about is on here there's a button that says support. If you click on that, you can find all kinds of extra things that we offer. Like if you weren't able to get into one of the More Than Able groups, but you still wanted to watch the videos and follow along with some of that curriculum, it's all on there. If you want to get our Renew Journal, you can do that. If you want to get a subscription to Right Now Media that has tons of Bible study options on there. If you want to download the Bible app, it's there. So many good things on here. So if you don't have the Church Center app, make sure you take some time today to download it and then explore all the things on there. And right now, I'd love for you to take out your connection cards. If you come here, you know this is one of the ways that we stay connected with each other. So make sure you take some time now or later in the service to fill one of these out. If you're new with us this morning, thanks for choosing to be here. We'd also love for you to fill out one of these cards and mark first or second time guest on it, because we have a gift that we'd like to send you in the mail. And then when you're done filling out, all you have to do is take this small part right here, and there's these big wooden offering boxes located right by the exit. If you just put it inside of that offering box, we will take it from there. So at this time, Dave is going to come up and share this week's sermon.
Good morning. It's good to see you guys all here today. We're into November, and so I don't know if you've started thinking about Thanksgiving and gratefulness and gratitude and all that's really good to do. One of the things I begin doing this time of year is start looking back and, how has 2024 been, and what do I have to be grateful about in 2024? And I know for some of you this has been a really good year. Maybe spiritually this has been a really good year where you've reconnected with Jesus or connected with Him for the first time or grown in some unique ways. And we have a great way for you to celebrate that next month. December 8th is our final baptism service of the year. So if that's something you would like to do, like you haven't had a chance to do it yet, it's a step in your spiritual journey that you know you need to take, you want to celebrate what God's been doing in your life, this is a great way to finish up the year. You can sign up by using the Church Center app that Steve was just talking about, or by writing us a note on your connection card. We'd love to have you take advantage. December 8th, last baptism service of the year. I am a list maker, and I know some of you are list makers too. I really believe there's two kinds of people in the world. There are people who make lists, and there are disorganized people. So I love to make lists. I'm always making lists, and I made a list this week of who are some of the great partnerships in history. Which, I mean, you're like, what's wrong with you? Why would you make a list like that? Well, it has to do with the sermon, all right? So just stay with me. But I thought I would share with you some of the people I came up with who made up some of the great partnerships in history. Of course, this is Dayton, Ohio, so we have to start with our very own Orville and Wilbur Wright, who transformed the world. And they are the reason why we say that Ohio is first in flight, and we don't care what North Carolina says. They are wrong, we are right, thanks to the Wright brothers, right? So, great partnership. Another great partnership in history, John and Paul, right? Some of you guys are like, oh, yes, we love John and Paul. This is one of those partnerships that started really well, didn't end really well, but it gave us some really good music in between, right? If you are around my age, you will remember one of the great partnerships in television history, Belky Bartakamos and Cousin Larry, right? Perfect Strangers. Some of you guys remember that show, love that show. What a great partnership. And then, of course, for all of you here, I couldn't not include Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? One of the greatest partnerships in the NFL that they still can't win. And it's hard to understand how you can have the best quarterback and the best receiver and still not win, but there you go. Maybe today, folks, maybe today. Partnerships really impact our lives, right? Like the people that we choose to partner with in life will determine to a great sense the direction of our life. And by this point in life, you've experienced this. You've experienced bad partnerships, right? Maybe in relationships or at work or in other places. You know what it's like to be in a bad partnership and how that can negatively impact the direction of your life. But you've also experienced good partnerships. And so you understand that when you partner with the right people, good things can happen. And this morning, I want us to focus on what it looks like for us to partner with God. Because there is no more important partnership in life than our partnership with God. And the reality is, to partner is to join forces. And so when we join forces with God, we often get to experience something bigger than we ever imagined. Right? God can do amazing things. And when we choose to partner with Him, we often get to experience those amazing things. Jesus talked about this in one of His parables. Now, we're going to get there in just a couple of minutes in Matthew chapter 25. I want to give you a little bit of the context, all right? So in Matthew 25, Jesus is nearing the end of His life on earth. He's in the week that we often call the Passion Week. So it begins with Palm Sunday when Jesus enters Jerusalem, and then it ends at the cross on Good Friday, and then ultimately the resurrection on Easter Sunday. But in between those two events, Jesus is in Jerusalem. And Matthew 25 is in this period of time. So in chapter 23, Jesus has a confrontation with the religious leaders. Now, they'd been having confrontations throughout Jesus' life and ministry. This is the big one. This is the one where Jesus just, he goes off on them. It's really good stuff. Read it yourself, Matthew 23. Jesus says, "Woe to you, you snakes and you vipers." He says, you try to make yourselves look really good on the outside, but on the inside, you're just whitewashed tombs. And he actually warns the people. He says, look, these people teach you the law, so you should pay attention to them, but don't follow their example because they are bad people. So Jesus has this confrontation, and then in the next chapter, chapter 24, his disciples want to know, okay, Jesus, it feels like maybe you're setting up your kingdom now. Is that what's happening? And Jesus is like, no, let me explain how that's going to happen. And so chapter 24 is full of Jesus making a lot of prophecies about the end times. And then he gets to chapter 25, and he's still carrying on the theme of the end times, but he's saying to his disciples, now, what I want you to understand is when I return, you need to be ready. And so he tells three stories in Matthew 25. The first two are parables. A parable is a story that's not necessarily true, but it's true to life. Sometimes we say it's like an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And so the first two stories are parables. The third story is not a parable. It's actually a prediction of what's going to happen when Jesus returns and judges all things. We're today going to look at the second parable. And remember, the point of these parables is to get his disciples ready for his return. So essentially what he's saying to them is, while I'm gone, here's how I want you to live. Now, because Jesus hasn't returned yet, these parables still apply perfectly to us. And so Jesus would say to us today, while I'm gone, here's how I want you to live until I return. All right? So Matthew 25, verse 14. If you have your Bible, you can turn there. We'll put it up on the screen. Jesus says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, And so the man is him. He's going to leave he's going to die, he's going to rise again, and then he's going to ascend to be back with the Father. And so that's the man going on the journey. It's actually Jesus, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. And then he went away. So a talent, we don't use this expression anymore, but a talent was at one point a measure of weight, and then ultimately it became a measure of currency. And so in the Roman Empire, a talent would have been the equivalent of about 20 years' wages for a day laborer. So that's a lot, right? So that's somebody who makes an hourly wage. What would they make in about 20 years? And it would be the equivalent today, it's kind of a loose equivalent, of somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, depending on how you do the math. So what Jesus is talking about here is a lot of money. Right? When he says that the master gave the servant 5 talents, say maybe as much as $5 million. 2 talents, $2 million. 1 talent, $1 million. It's a lot of money. But I want you to pay attention to some of the specific words that Jesus uses here, because in these words, there's some really important truths that we can learn about God, but we can also begin to ask ourselves maybe some really helpful questions. Jesus says the man goes on a journey and called to his servants and entrusted to them his property. This is important. Whose property is it? It's the master's, right? It's the master's property. So the master is giving his property to the servants. And when he transfers that money to them, it does not become theirs. It still belongs to the master. You see, the servants didn't receive this money and say, oh, wow, great, now I'm rich. I got a whole bunch of money. They fully understood this is the master's money that he is giving to me. It's my job to manage the master's money. Now, we actually have an expression that we use today for someone like this. We say there are people in our world who have what we call a fiduciary responsibility. And what that means is this is a person like a financial manager or a trustee of an estate, or maybe someone who's on a board of a corporation. They have a fiduciary responsibility, which means they are in charge of someone else's money. And they are bound by ethics and by law to use that money in a way that is beneficial for the person who owns it. That's what it means to have a fiduciary responsibility. And that's a fun word to say, but it's also a fun word because of where it comes from. It has its origins in Latin, the Latin word fide, which means faithful. You see, the idea here is that someone with a fiduciary responsibility is expected to be faithful in the way they manage someone else's money. And that's exactly what's going on here. What the master is saying to the servants is, look, this is mine. I'm handing it to you. You are to faithfully manage it because it is mine. Now, do you see where all this is going, right? Because the parable is intended to teach us a lesson about life and about God. And what the reality is that everything that we have in life actually doesn't belong to us. We're actually managing it for God, because God owns everything. And so whatever it is that God gives to us, our responsibility is to manage it in a way that he would be excited about, in a way that would be acceptable to him. Now notice that not only does he say that it's his money, but look at the end of the verse. He says, to one he gave 5, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. And what we see here is that the master knows his servants. In fact, he's a really good master. He knows what they're capable of. He knows what they're not capable of. He knows what they're ready for. He knows what they're not ready for. And so he gives to the first servant $5 million because he says, you're ready for this. You can handle this. You can do well with this. I trust you to manage this. And to the one that he gives 2, that's still a lot of money, but it's not 5. And essentially what he's saying is, I trust you. I know that you can do this. You're not ready for 5 yet, but you are ready for 2. And the same with the 1. Right? I trust you. You can handle this. You're not ready for 2, but you're ready for 1. What a powerful reminder to us that God knows us. And that everything he gives to us, he does so because he knows what we can handle. He knows what we're ready for. Now this actually goes both ways. Sometimes when we're in a hard time, this is a helpful truth. When I'm going through suffering or difficulties, it's good to remind myself that God never gives me anything that I'm not ready for. That God never gives me anything that I don't have the ability to handle, that I can't get through if I go through it with Him. And so when I find myself in the middle of a hard time, I can remind myself, hey, God wouldn't have given this to me if He didn't think I was ready for it. And so I need to press on. I need to endure. I need to rely on Him because He is faithful. But also, this is true with our plenty. Like when we have a lot, we have to remember that God gave us a lot because He knew we were ready for it. He knew we could handle it. And He expects us to manage it as He would. Now, this also means that there are times in life when I pray and I say, God, will you give me this? Or God, will you do this for me? Or God, will you change this in my life? And sometimes God doesn't answer those prayers the way I want Him to. And those are the times I also need to remind myself, He's not giving me this because He knows I'm not ready for it. He's not giving this to me because maybe He knows that I can't handle it. It may be that sometimes the reason I don't get what I want in life is because God knows I'm not ready, He knows I can't handle it, and He knows it will be harmful, not helpful for me. And so He withholds it. And maybe sometimes it's just because I have some growing that I need to do before I'm ready. Or sometimes I need to change my priorities or I need to change my perspective, whatever it is. God says, you know what, you're not ready for that. That wouldn't be good for you right now, so I'm not going to give that to you. So here we have a master who knows his servants, and so he says, you get 5, you get 2, and you get 1. Verse 16, he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. If I was doing the translating work on this, I would have actually changed it a little bit. I mean, the word traded works. It makes sense. But probably the more literal translation would be to say, he who had received the 5 talents went at once and put it to work. Because that really is what Jesus said. He said, he put that money to work. He used it to grow it. So essentially, he took those 5 talents and he invested them and made the 5 more. So if we can try to think about how that might have worked, remember this was a fishing culture, right? Jesus was probably telling this parable to a lot of people who understood fishing. And so maybe the guy with 5 talents went out and started this big chain of stores like Bass Pro Shop or something, right? Because, I mean, he had a lot of money and he made a lot more. And maybe the second guy, he couldn't build anything quite that big, so maybe he started a chain of restaurants like Long John Silver's or something like that. Whatever it is, both of them took the money they were given, put it to work, and profited. They doubled the money. But the third guy is a little bit different. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. So the third guy doesn't put the money to work at all. So the money benefits no one. The money's good for no one. He doesn't put it to work at all. And as I read these 3 descriptions of the 3 servants, this is an opportunity for me to pause and ask myself a tough question. For whom am I putting my money to work? Maybe I can say that a little easier way to understand. Who is my money working for? Because let's just be honest, most of the time, the answer to that question is, I put my money to work for me, right? I need to meet my needs. I got to buy the groceries. I got to pay the rent. I got to pay the bills, whatever it may be. I'm putting my money to work for me. I'm putting my money to work to give me a little bit of pleasure, a little bit of fun, right? I'm putting my money to work so that in the future I can have a little more security, be a little more comfortable. I'm putting my money to work and that I'm buying things that make my life more convenient. The reality is most of us, if we're honest, would answer the question and say, most of the time I put most of my money to work for me. Now, there are times when maybe I put my money to work for others, right? I support my kids, I give gifts to my friends, and sometimes I put my money to work for God. I give something to the church or somewhere else where I'm investing in the kingdom. But most of the time, most of my money is working for me. And I think Jesus wants us to consider this as he's teaching this parable. He wants us to rethink that whole equation. Because the reality is that everything I just said is foundationally wrong. Because did you hear what I said? I put my money to work to do this. I put my money to work to do this. And do you remember what we said at the very beginning? It's actually not mine. I am a manager. I am managing God's money. And so the question actually is not, who do I put my money to work for? The question is, who am I putting God's money to work for? Now, does this change how I want to answer the question? Now, let me just say this. One of the reasons that God gives us what he gives us is so that we can live. God actually wants us to use the resources he gives us to take care of ourselves so that we won't be a burden on others. And God is okay with us having a little bit of fun in life. In fact, if we can enjoy his creation and do so with gratitude, that's honoring to him and that's worshipful. But the bigger question is if it's God's money, for whom should I be putting it to work? Should I be like the first two servants who are using it to make a profit? Or should I be like the third servant? It's kind of digging a hole and burying it and putting it in the ground. Well, now the master is going to return and evaluate what every servant has done. Verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Just let me point this out real quick. Remember, these parables are designed to get Jesus' disciples ready for his return. That's the main theological principle here. So this is super helpful for us. I love that Jesus just put in here, after a long time he returned. Because here we sit 2,000 years later. And wouldn't it be easy to say, Jesus said he was coming back, but it's been 2,000 years. Maybe he's not coming back. Maybe we misunderstood. But here he says, guys, it's going to be a long time. So we can take a little comfort in that and say Jesus actually anticipated it would be a long time before he returned. Now that doesn't change the big principle, which is we need to be ready. So let's see what he says. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So what's the master going to do? He's now going to hold them accountable for what they've done, how well they've managed his money. This is also going to be true when Jesus returns. When Jesus returns, he's going to ask us, how did you manage what I gave to you? Right? What did you do with what I gave to you? And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. I love this. The first servant is excited to give an account to the master. Why? Because he's used it well. He's done well with it. He's managed it well. And so because he's managed the master's resources well, he's eager to see the master and say to the master, look at what I've done for you. And you read on and you see that the second servant is the same. He's excited. Look at master, this is what you gave me and this is what I've done with it. I'm excited to show you this. And here's another one of those places in the parable where we need to pause just for a second and ask ourselves another tough question. If Jesus came back today, would I be running towards him to give him a report of how I've managed his resources? Would I be super excited, man? I cannot wait, Jesus, to tell you what I've done for you with what you gave to me. Or would I maybe be a little more hesitant and say, I wish I had done better? But look at what the master says to these servants. Verse 21, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. First, the master says, good job, I'm going to make you a partner. Right? I'm going to give you more responsibilities. I'm going to increase my investment in you because you've demonstrated yourself to be faithful. So he says, we're going to be partners now. What a cool thing to think that when I manage God's resources well, he gives me more responsibilities. When I partner with him, he partners with me. But look at the ultimate outcome. He says, enter into the joy of your master. You see, when I use the resources that God has given me to do God's work in God's world, the outcome is more joy. Last week we looked at one of Jesus' teachings where he said, don't store up for yourselves earthly treasures, right? Why? Because they don't last, right? Thieves steal them. Rust corrupts them. They don't last. Nothing of this earth lasts. Do you know what lasts? Joy. Joy lasts beyond our circumstances. Joy lasts into eternity. And again, what the master is saying to the servants is, I'm going to give you something so much better than what you could earn. You can use that money to earn yourself earthly possessions, but that can't bring you joy, but I can give you joy. And this is what Jesus says to us. You can use the stuff that I gave you to build up stores of whatever you want. That won't bring you joy. But if you use it for me, then I will give you joy. Now, that's the first two servants. Both of them, exact same experience. Master, here's what I did. Here's the outcome. And to both of them, the master says, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. But then we have the third. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed, so I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Growing up, I didn't understand this part of the story. I lived in a family, we didn't have much. My dad was a pastor for much of my life growing up. We were in a rural location, and so we just didn't have a lot. And I sometimes joke about it, but it's true, that, we'd get up in the morning and my mom would say, all right, do you want a peanut butter or jelly sandwich? Because you couldn't have both. You had to save, right? And we would get thin sliced bologna and we would slice it again. This was how we grew up. And so we really valued saving. So in my life, it was like, I got to save everything I can save because you never know when you might need it. So when I would read this story, and I had like a Jesus storybook kind of thing, and I'd read this story, and I'd read about the first two guys, and I'd be like, they're kind of foolish. They're playing fast and loose with the master's money. What if they lose it? And I'd read about the third guy, and he's saving it, and I'm like, good for him. Because no matter what happens, he's not going to lose it, right? He's going to, if the rainy day comes, he's going to have it. Good for him. And so I had a really hard time understanding why Jesus gets mad at him until I fully understood what it was that he was actually saying. Because what he's actually saying to the master is, Master, you didn't give me very much. You gave them a lot, I only had a little. And because I only had a little, I was afraid. And because I was afraid of losing the little that I had, I hid it and I did nothing with it. And the master says, that's bad management. That's poor management of what I've given you. Listen to what he says. His master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew, hold on to that word, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. So what he's saying here to the servant is his own words, right? The servant said this first, you reap where you have not sown, you gather where you scattered no seed. Essentially what he's saying is, look, you make money where you didn't even plant money. You invest money, you make your money work for you, you use your money to make more money. It's like the master was one of the sharks on Shark Tank. He only went in on the investments that were sure to bring a good profit. And the servant understands this. But the master says, look, you knew who I was. You knew how I operated. You knew what my values were. And even though you knew all of that about me, it didn't change what you did. And sometimes I'm concerned that for me, and probably for you, it's so easy to know a lot about God and not have that change us at all. It's so easy for us to think, well, I just need to build up my knowledge about God. I need to know more about Him. I need to learn more about Him. I know that some of you come to church on Sundays and you get super excited when you leave if you hear me say something you'd never heard before. You're like, man, I learned something new today. I never knew that. I learned something new. This is awesome and this is exciting. And I'm glad that's your experience, but please hear this. If you learn a bunch of new stuff about God from me and it doesn't change your life at all, then I've failed and you've failed. Because knowing God and not changing is what the demons do. That's what James said. James said the demons know that Jesus is God. That doesn't save them. And for this servant, he knows everything about the master, but he doesn't do anything about it. So the master says, how can you know all this about me and not do something about it? And this is what I think sometimes God says to us, you know who I am. I'm the provider. Why don't you do something about that? I'm the protector. Why don't you do something about that? I'm generous with you. You see, we know so much about God, but does it change us? Does it cause us to do something? And the master is saying to the servant, if you knew this is who I was, then why didn't you manage my money the way you knew I would? That's what he says in the next verse. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. If you knew this is what I did, then here's what you should have done. And then at my coming, I should have received at least a little bit, what was mine, with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. If you knew who I am, why didn't you act accordingly? If you knew how I operated, then why didn't you operate the same way? You see, the hard reality here is we can know a lot about God and still choose not to partner with him. And when we don't partner with him, we miss out on what he's able to do. The first two servants got it right because they understood two things. They understood what the master's agenda was, and they understood what the master's expectations were. And if we want to partner with God, we need to understand those two things. So here it is. The master's agenda is more, and his expectation is faithfulness. Now, in the story, the more means more money, more profit. Use what I've given you, invest it, manage it well to earn more, right? But for God, it's more people. This is true throughout the Bible, that we see that God is always about multiplying his goodness into the nations. That's why when Jesus left his disciples, his final instructions were, go to the whole world, preach the whole gospel to all people, to all creation, to all nations. All. God wants everybody to come to him. He wants more and more people to come to him. This is his agenda. This is his agenda for us as individuals, that more people come to God through us. This is his agenda for us as a church. That's why when we talk about who we are, we say that we are on a mission to do what? To connect more people to Jesus, because that's God's agenda. And his expectation is faithfulness. In the story, the master wants the servants to be faithful to who he is. So he's a person who takes risk. He's a person who invests. So he wants them to be faithful to that. This is awesome. The first servant says, you gave me 5 and I made 10. And the master says, awesome, well done. The second guy says, you only gave me 2. So I only made 2 more. He gets the exact same praise as the first one. What does this reveal about the master? He's not interested in the size of the gift. He's interested in the faithfulness of the giver. You see, God gives all of us different stuff. Different abilities, different talents, different experiences, different amounts of money, different possessions, different power, different positions. He gives all of us different stuff. He's not interested in how much we do with it. He's interested in how faithful we are with it. And sometimes we get into this game where we start to compare ourselves to others. Like, I'm sure the servant number 2 looked at servant number 1 and said, he's got so much more than me. He can do so much more than me. The master must like him more than me. But he was wrong. And servant number one says, they both have so much more than me. I can't do much with what I have. But the truth that Jesus is trying to hammer home is this: don't bury your gift. Even if you think you only have a little. Like, why did the servant bury his gift? There's really 3 reasons. The first is that he didn't think he had very much. Right? He looked at what the others have and he said, I don't have very much. I've only got a little bit. God, why didn't you give me more? Why didn't you give me what you gave that other person? The second reason is that he was afraid, right? That's what he said. He said, I was afraid that I would lose the little I have. Now, I get this. I understand this. I understand what it's like to say, I've only got a little, and because I only have a little, I'm afraid that I might lose the little I have. But do you understand that fear is a terrible motivator? Fear will cause us to stop. Fear will cause us to not do what we know we ought to do, and fear will keep us from doing even what we want to do. As our kids were growing up, one of the things we said all the time in our house was, it's okay to be afraid. Because kids go through fearful experiences. They go to a new school, they have a new experience, or they start something new. All these things that can be fearful for a kid, and we would always say, look, it's Emma, Liam, it's okay to be afraid, but it's not okay to let your fear stop you. And the third servant, he's afraid that he's going to lose the little he has, and so he does what? He does nothing. He holds on more tightly to what he has. And the problem is he completely misunderstood the nature of the master. And when we allow our fear to control us, or when we allow our comparisons to others to control us, and we look at others and say, I don't have very much, I've only got a little, we're missing out on the nature of our master. Because do you understand that God is a God who can take a little and do a lot? That God is a God who can take what I think is insignificant, but if I'm willing to give it to Him, He can do amazing things. Do you remember Moses? Moses grew up in the palace of Egypt. He kills an Egyptian, so he has to run for his life. Ends up in the wilderness, thinks his life is over. He's just a shepherd for the rest of his life, and he's out one day taking care of his sheep, and he sees a bush that's on fire. But it's strange because although the bush is on fire, it's not burning up. It's not being consumed. So he goes over to take a closer look, and the bush starts talking to him. Super strange. And the first thing that the bush says is, take off your feet, for you're on holy ground. And so now Moses understands God is actually speaking to me through this burning bush. This is actually a great place for me to just pause and remind you that there's a bonfire tonight. So 5 o'clock, back out at the barn. That's a great chance to just kind of hang out, have fun, meet some people, catch up with old friends. We will have a great fire, but our fire will consume all the wood, and our fire will not speak to you. Okay? I don't think. So God and Moses have this conversation, and God says to Moses, Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt. I want you to talk to Pharaoh, and I want you to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses is going to argue with God, which is a strange thing to do. Because if I saw a bush that was on fire but not being consumed, and the bush started talking to me and told me to take off my feet for I was on holy ground, I would not argue with that bush. But Moses does, and he says, God, I can't do that. I don't have the ability. I don't have the resources. He's got all of these excuses, and really what he's saying is, God, I'm too small. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. And so God says to Moses, Moses, what's that you have in your hand? And Moses is a shepherd, so in his hand he's got a shepherd's staff. He says it's a staff. Now, a staff is just a fancy way of saying a stick, because that's what it was. It was a stick. And Moses says, I've got this stick in my hand. And God says, that's all you're going to need. And I'm sure Moses is thinking, well, it's a stick, right? There's hundreds of them around here, millions on the, it's just a stick. It's nothing special. And so God says to Moses, Moses, throw your stick on the ground. And he throws it on the ground, and it turns into a snake. And that's scary. Not nearly as scary as what God says next. He says, pick up the snake. At this point, I would argue. But Moses picks up the snake, and it turns back into a stick. And God's like, that's all you need. And then you remember the rest of the story. Moses goes back to Egypt, and he takes that same stick, and he holds it out over the Nile River, and the Nile River turns to blood. And that's one of the plagues that God uses to free his people. And a little while later, Moses holds that same stick out over the Red Sea, and the water parts, and the children of Israel walk across free after 400 years of slavery. And they're out in the wilderness, and they don't have any water, and Moses takes that same stick, and he hits a rock, and water comes from the rock and provides for everything they need. And you get the picture. God can do amazing things through the things that we think are insignificant. In our eyes, it's just a stick. It's not very much. In God's eyes, it's all I need. God can take your little and do a lot. So how can I be more faithful? Because that's God's expectation. Whether I've got a lot or whether I've got a little, how can I be more faithful? Let me give you 3 questions to chew on this week. Okay? Question number 1, what do I have? Right? What do I have? Because all of us have time, probably more than we think, right? We have time when we're standing in line. Maybe we could send out an encouraging text, or time when we're waiting in a waiting room and we could maybe spend that time praying, or time when we're driving. We all have time. What's the time that I have? We all have talents, abilities that we could use to volunteer, or to meet other people's needs, or to just help out with something in the neighborhood, whatever it might be. All of us have time, all of us have talents, all of us have treasure. Some have more, some have less. But even if you've only got a little, remember, God can do a lot with a little. So what do I have? And the second question is, what would God do with it? Right? So I know what I have. What would God do with what I have? And here's where we remember his agenda. God's agenda is more, right? We know this because he says in his word, he says he wants everyone to come to him. He's not willing that any should perish. He's being patient, holding off on judgment because he wants more. He wants more people to come to him. And how far is he willing to go to make that happen? Well, he's willing to give up everything. Right? That's the story of God. He's willing to sacrifice everything. Philippians 2 tells us that Jesus, even though he was God, did not think that was something he had to hold tightly to, but he was willing to open his hands and generously give himself away and become like us, become a human, and then submit himself to death, even a death on the cross. Why? So that God could have us. He was willing to pay the price so that we could be connected to God. God is willing to sacrifice everything so that he can have more of us. So what do I have? What would God do with it? Well, he'd sacrifice everything. So the question then for me is, what will I do with it? Really, here's where I'm saying to myself, look, how am I using what God has given me? Am I using what God has given me the way he would use it? How much of what God has given me am I willing to sacrifice back to him? Charles Thomas Studd was born in England in the late 1800s. He was born to one of England's wealthiest families, and as you might expect for a guy named C.T. Studd, he was a great athlete. If he was born today, he'd have probably been an NFL quarterback, but because he was living in the late 1800s, he played cricket, and he was good. He went to the best universities because his parents were rich, and he played on their teams, and then he went and played on the England national team, won global tournaments. He was a household name in England. Everybody knew who C.T. Studd was. When he was young, his father died, and a massive inheritance was passed to him. It was about 30,000 pounds then. It would be about $7.5 million now, and he gave it all away. He gave some to the Salvation Army. He gave some to a guy named George Mueller, who was running an orphanage. He gave some to Moody Bible Institute, which is a college in Chicago, Illinois, that even today is continuing to turn out pastors and missionaries around the world. And once C.T. Studd had given away all of the money that he inherited, he gathered his family, and they moved to China to be missionaries. And he lived out the rest of his life as a missionary in China, in India, and finally in Africa. And over that time, he started organizations that recruited and produced more and more missionaries, some that continue to exist today. But this guy who started life out with everything. He was wealthy, he was famous, he was popular, he was beloved, he had it all. His life ended in relative obscurity because he died in Congo in West Africa. Why? Why did he do that? Well, C.T. Studd believed that everything God gave him was his, and he wanted to manage it as well as he could. In fact, he wrote a poem about this. Some of you will recognize some of the words in this poem because they became a song later. He wrote, "Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." Now, I don't know exactly what happened when C.T. Studd died, but I imagine that as he crossed over into eternity, he was welcomed by Jesus. And I'm quite confident that as he entered heaven, Jesus said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord." That's how I hope to end my life. That's how I hope you end your life. I want to pray for you. And then after I pray, just stick around for one more minute. I want to talk to you a little bit about next Sunday, all right? Father, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your provision and your protection. We thank you for the way that you have prospered us. And Father, we thank you that you are willing to partner with us in life. And I pray this morning as we think about these words that Jesus spoke for our benefit, that you would help each of us to consider what it looks like for us to be faithful to you. and to faithfully use all that you have given us to serve your kingdom. Father, thank you for loving us enough to send Jesus to die for us so that we can be connected to you. In your name, amen. All right, next week is Commitment Sunday. And the reason I'm taking a minute to talk to you about it today is because we've never done anything like this. So it's going to be a little bit different. At the end of our service next Sunday, we're going to have a short time that we don't have something to call it. We'll call it the commitment time. Now, let me just say this. If you're here today for the first time or the second time, or you're kind of just checking the gathering out, this isn't for you. I'm super glad you're here, and you've showed up at a great time. We're running out of space, and so we believe we need to make more space so more people can get connected to Jesus. And part of this project is to expand the building and remodel the building a little bit. But next week is the opportunity for all of us to make a commitment as to how we want to participate in this project. And so I'm going to ask you next week at the end of the service to write down on a card a 3-year commitment where you're going to say, you know what, over the next 3 years, I believe that this is what I can contribute. Above and beyond what I already give, this is what I can contribute to the More Than Able project. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to spend some time thinking about this and praying about this and asking yourself really simply, God, what have you given to me that I can give back to you as a part of this project? Now, I know that some of you are super excited about this. I know that some of you are like eager, and you've been thinking about it. You've known this was coming. You've already got your number. You can't wait till next week, and you get to write it down. So I'm excited for you. And I know that some of you are thinking right now, I'm not coming next week. No way. So let me talk to you just for a second, all right? I want you to come next week. For the most part, next Sunday is going to be pretty normal. We'll sing our normal songs. It'll be a normal sermon, right? Just at the very end, we'll do the commitment thing. And here's the deal, guys. If you're here next Sunday and we're doing the commitment thing and everybody around you is writing down and you're like, I'm not ready, right? I don't feel like I know what I need to commit. I don't feel like I know if I need to commit. You know, I don't want you to feel compelled. I don't want you to feel pressured. I want you to understand if you come next week and you don't make a commitment, nobody's going to make you feel guilty. Nobody's going to shame you. We are just super glad that you're a part of our family, all right? So I want you to come next week. Even though it's Commitment Sunday, I want you to come. For the rest of you, be excited. Keep praying about it. Ask yourself, God, what do you want me to do next week on Commitment Sunday? All right, as is true every Sunday, our prayer crew will be down front at the end of our service. If there's something that God is doing in your life and you want to talk to Him about it, come on down. They would love to pray with you about that. And will you stand up with me before you go? Let me remind you that God loves you. Because of His great love for you this week, He wants to fill you with everything that is good. So if you'll focus on Him, if you'll pay attention to what He's already doing in your life, you will see that He is pouring into you His love, His grace, His mercy, His kindness, His hope, His peace, His joy, His strength, His forgiveness, so you can be full and overflowing. And as all of that is poured into you, it will begin to spill out of you, and it will impact the lives of everyone around you. So you can be a person who's showing others the love of Jesus and the goodness of God. I hope we can all be that kind of person this week. I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Come back at 5 for the bonfire. If not, come back next Sunday. I can't wait to see you then. Until we're all together again, may God richly bless you. Have a fantastic Sunday.